Well, I would say let's get started. There's still some people rolling in, but hi everyone. This is fun. I don't want to get into the book yet. First thing I want to do is talk about a couple things that were raised on Discord during the week. And I was not very active on Discord this week. I'm sorry, it was a busy one, but I was reading everything. And you guys had some really good discussions going. One thing I want to focus on specifically, there was a lot of conversation around Jesse 42's post. Jesse, you're not here now, are you, Jesse? I haven't seen you comment, but anyway, I'm going to skip Jesse's first question because I want to get back to that. It's about Gandalf talking about something holding him back from talking to Saruman. I want to come back to that when we get there. But then questions 2 through 4 or 5. Oh, you are here. Awesome. Okay. So your questions 2 through 5 kind of winked at a similar issue, and that got discussed a lot in the chat, which was kind of the nature of good versus evil in Tolkien, and it's a big one. It's something, we're not going to answer it here or on the stream, or I mean on the channel in one chapter, but this is something I want to keep looking at and keep thinking about as we go through. There are a few of these sort of long-term longitudinal questions that I want to keep in the back of our mind as we read each chapter. I'm going to anyway. And the nature of good versus evil is one. And Jesse and Cece had a good exchange that was, for me, really enlightening, that made me think about a lot of things. And I thought both raised some good points, and I think kind of came to a similar sort of conclusion. And I'd encourage you to read their discussion as well, and a couple other people chimed in as well. I'm sorry, I can't remember the names, but I think it arrived at a good place, and sort of the discussion was around Smeagol, Gollum, which we'll get to. I don't want to bring that in too much now, but the nature of good versus evil, and is someone wholly good or wholly evil within Tolkien's mythology. And I think there's something interesting there, and I think that we can look at that as we continue to go. But what I'm kind of more interested in, not to duck the question, but the fact of good and evil. And I think it was Cece that raised this issue in response, was that kind of a modern narrative bent is toward anti-heroes and sort of a relativistic look at morality, and I think that is popular now, but I don't think it was contemporary at the time of Tolkien's writing of this, and B, I don't think that was consistent with Tolkien's worldview in any case as a Catholic, and I think he had a very objective view, clearly, and I'm not trying to bring in too much of him as a person, but him in his work shows that there is good and there is evil, and some characters are almost entirely evil. Some are, by all measures, good. But that's because of their actions. That's because of the actions that they take, which can be objectively judged. And I think that's interesting. And we're going to see that as early as the trip through the Old Forest, which we'll get to. I don't want to get all the way to Ithilien yet. There's a good character there, I think, objectively all good. But the fact of objective good and objective evil, I think, is something that we need to reckon with. It's not a modern concept, or at least it's not in favor, but I think that we need to remember that when we're assessing Smeagol, Gollum, Gandalf, Frodo's actions, there are two questions. One is Tolkien trying to say this is a wholly evil character, wholly good character, something like that. But he is always going to acknowledge, I think, and maybe I end up proving wrong on this, but that good and evil do exist and can be judged on an objective basis. I'm just going to catch up on the chat here. Looks like everyone's chatting on YouTube and not on Discord, so that's good. Okay, so I'm just gonna not monitor that as much. Let me know if I need to go back there off of something. Okay, so there were some specific questions from Jesse's post, and I'm going back to that a lot because I like when people ask questions. It's a good framing device. Okay, we're going to do a close reading, and I guess this is a good lead into it, but let's talk about, this is out of order in the book, but Jesse's fifth question: does it feel out of character for Gandalf to torture Gollum for information? Or am I just interpreting wrong different here? I saw a lot of agreement on this point, so let's take a look. I want to look at that specific passage. Okay, so this is Gandalf talking. I endured him as long as I could, but the truth was desperately important, and in the end I had to be harsh. I put the fear of fire on him, and wrung the true story out of him, bit by bit, together with much sniveling and snarling. He thought he was misunderstood and ill-used, etc., etc. Okay. The key sentence there, or the key part of the sentence to me, is I put the fear of fire on him and wrung the true story out of him. Oh, good question. I'm going to do that right now. Okay, I'm pinning Jesse's comments in the interim. Yeah, okay, so if you go to the pins in the book one discussion, thank you for that suggestion, that's a good call. You should be able to find it. Let me just confirm that, but it looks, I believe it's pinned now. Yep, okay, pinned messages in the book one Fellowship of the Ring. There we go. I endured him as long as I could, but the truth was desperately important. That's the context. So I tried, I endured as long as I could, but time's a factor, truth is important, so in the end I had to be harsh. What is the harshness that Gandalf used? So I have two answers to your question, not that they're the objective truth, but this is my reaction. A, yes, I found this disquieting. I always have. I've always had a hard time reckoning this passage with what I think of Gandalf. Two, I still don't think he tortured him. Now, torture, I don't think he physically tortured him. There's terror, there's fear, you can argue that's torture as well. I don't believe that it is an inescapable conclusion from this passage that he tortured him. He scared him. That is clear. He put the fear of fire on him. We know, or we will know, spoilers, Gandalf is, well, no, actually it's not spoilers. We know that he was introduced as, in the context of his fireworks, his having skill with fires and whatnot. We end up finding out why that is, but we know that that's his trademark. We also know from this chapter that Gollum is afraid of light, certainly. Fire makes light. We can assume, living in a dank, dark cave under the mountains, he would probably not have, we know he ate things raw. He would never have had fire. He would be afraid of that too. I think it's perfectly believable that Gollum was just terrified of fire, and Gandalf used that. Did he threaten him? Probably. Probably. He probably did. I will burn you. But this is something that I heard somewhere else, so I'm not taking credit for it. But the key to me to conclude that he did not torture him is the mixed metaphor here. I put the fear of fire on him and wrung the true story out of him bit by bit. That is a allusion to the rack, the torture device, right? He didn't put him on the rack. He didn't wring the story out of him. He scared him with fire. So to me, if he wanted to say, I burned him until he told me, I don't think he would have mixed metaphors like that. Is it possible Gandalf is using some sort of metaphor here for a magical ability he doesn't disclose? Holly, we don't have any evidence for that. I suppose it's possible. I hadn't really considered it. Jesse says it still feels like at least psychological torture. Yes. I think that's what it is. I think he's scaring him into then we'll be able saying focus, scaring him into focusing and wringing the truth out of him. And maybe it's just me not wanting to picture Ian McKellen burning Gollum, and I don't. But I don't think that is what is inescapable from that passage, and I'm going to choose to believe that he just scared him. And there's some support for that later on. So a couple passages down on the same page, at least in my version. Oh yes, he came out. His longing for the ring proved stronger than his fear of the orcs or even of the light. Okay, so he has a fear of the light. Again, that to me says if Gandalf can create fireworks, for example, he'd be scared of that. That would terrify him, of course. It would hurt his eyes too. And then a little further down, light of sun and moon, he still feared and hated. The tools are there for Gandalf to terrify him and psychologically torture him. I get it. That's a fair comment without actually burning him. I don't know if that arrives at this was a completely moral and righteous action by Gandalf. I'm not going there, but I also don't think that we need to go as far as he went to the worst excesses of torture here. I'm just going to catch up here. DP says, I always think that since Gandalf is a wizard and not a person, maybe he acts under other values and morale. I think that the evil he encounters is so big he saw the use of fire as necessary. I don't agree with the first part. I don't think that we have evidence yet, or will, but let's watch for this, that Gandalf plays by his own rules of morality. Let's watch for, is there a different objective standard of morality between wizards and other races, or any delineation? Fourth Sphinx says, I think it's an implied threat. Yeah, I think that it is an implied threat, or even maybe an explicit threat. Amir, yes, I have not done a live stream, which then is archived on the channel before, but that is my understanding of what will happen when this live stream is done, and I will attempt to make that so. So If feel free to go to bed. I know that a lot of people are not in my time zone here, but yes, by all means. Oh, this is an interesting contrast. Anna Apothecary. Is that an apothecary? I like that. Okay. I mean, Gandalf isn't above scaring people to do the right thing. Take him convincing Bilbo to leave the ring. Yes, thinking more about the movie in this context, I agree. I think that the movie played it a little more blunt than the books do. I think that Gandalf clearly, you know, scares Bilbo into acting properly there. Like he's you know, the ring is getting a grip on him, and Gandalf kind of scares him out of it. I don't think that's what happens in the book. I don't think that, you know, yes, he does seem to grow taller. The room seems to go dark. He's obviously putting forth his power in a scary way, but I really think there is some nuance there in the book that he's not just scaring him. He's really putting forth his magic is a weird thing in Tolkien. It's not straightforward, but to the extent that Gandalf has magic and can use it, it does often seem to be in support of people's wills. We'll see that in Rohan. And that is kind of his purview, is bucking up the morale of Middle-earth. And so that's where I land with the whole Gandalf Gollum torture thing. I'm not entirely ready to excuse it as, oh no, he didn't do anything wrong, and I don't. We haven't even really gotten into the like, well, it was necessary, so, which is the excuse that Gandalf gives, which isn't a great objectively moral rationale in my view. But I think it would be a much worse justification if he did physically torture him. How morally wrong is it to scare Gollum into talking straight and quickly? I think it's left up to the reader there. Myself, I side with Gandalf. Isn't part of this to show how good and evil can exist in one person? The important is making the good out of the bad. Like, no one is perfect in the story. Even Gandalf is not perfect, but he's doing it for good overall. That's a good question, and I don't think that we're going to see a lot in this book of evil can be done, or evil should be done, or evil may be done, that good may come of it. As a principle, I feel like that is not consistently evinced in the book. In fact, I feel more often we're going to see examples of good being done illogically that works out well because it was the right thing to do. Yeah, I agree. The Gollum isn't all evil, certainly. And yes, good and evil actions can exist in everyone. But I guess where I would go with this is, if Gandalf's actions in scaring or torturing, however you want to describe it, Gollum, were wrong, then they were objectively wrong whether good came of it or not, and that we need to judge his actions, not judge who he is. Yeah. Holly, yes, so at this point in the book we are pretty new to Gandalf, but I don't think he would be thinking of it that way. I think so. Stepping outside the frame of the book, he's only writing The Lord of the Rings because The Hobbit was a runaway publishing success. He's writing this, he ends up writing it as a sequel to The Hobbit. That is the intent here. So to him, anyone who reads The Lord of the Rings, he has to assume has already read The Hobbit. Now, that's not how it ended up, but I think that's how we have to read it, is that if you're reading Lord of the Rings for the first time and you haven't read The Hobbit, you would not be reading it in the way that Tolkien assumed you would. So to readers of The Lord of the Rings, Tolkien is assuming that you already know Gandalf quite well from The Hobbit. Yes, it's a high bluff check, Fourth Sphinx. Yes, I agree. He's +7 or 8 for sure. Let's see. Yes, Thimblebeetle. Sorry, Thimblebeetle. What's your name on? Or do you want me to just call you that, or what can I call you? But having to put his foot down took its toll on him. Yes, he seems regretful. He does. He's apologetic almost. He's making excuses for it. I don't think it sits right with him either, because I think he is mostly good. I think he knows it was objectively wrong. He's excusing it, but I don't think it was right. Okay, yeah. So okay, a lot of good comments here. I think I'm going to leave it there myself, but I am uncomfortable with an interpretation again that he put his fire on him at all. Sorry, just scrolling back to, oh, and I can just go back to the pin, right? Good call. No, I don't. I love all these questions, Jesse, but I to answer them, I would have to go way too far forward in the book. Maybe that's my failing, but that's immediately where my mind goes. I'm going to keep that pin for a while because I want to keep looking at it. Okay. The other passage that we said we were going to do a close reading of, and I find this one really, really interesting, and I want to spend some time on it. Oh, Wu Chan, hi. I know him. You accept that with him? Page. Okay, hi. Yes. Okay, perfect. Okay, so page 62 of my version here. How long have you known this? Asked Frodo at length. And how much did Bilbo know? How long have you known this? This being the ring. This being the nature of the ring. That it is a great ring, a terrible ring. Gandalf doesn't answer. The first question that he has, Gandalf does not answer. How long have you known this, and how much did Bilbo know? Gandalf answers how much Bilbo knew. He has a long paragraph here about how much Bilbo knew. Yes, he warned me of that in his last letter, said Frodo. I've always kept it on the chain. Okay. So they go through that. Again, how long have you known all this? Asked Bilbo again. The fact that he has to ask him twice is significant. I think that through this passage, we get a read of Gandalf being evasive. And that comes out in his... He ultimately does answer the question. How long have you known all this? Asked Frodo again. Known, said Gandalf. I have known much that only the wise know, Frodo. That's not an answer. That's stalling for time, bluffing, obfuscating. But if you mean known about this ring, yes, of course, that is exactly what he means. Well, I still do not know, one might say. There is a last test to make, but I no longer doubt my guess. Boy, this is I can't see Ian McKellen's Gandalf reading this, performing this, right? Like this is just, he is so evasive, he is so uncomfortable in this passage. No, what do you mean? What do you mean? Oh, this what? This ring? Yes. Oh no, I don't actually know. No, it's baffling. Like, and it'll come out why. We understand why, but this was completely missed in the movies, because of there was no time lapse in the movies. This has been, what was it, 17 years, I think? Yeah, 17 years since the long expected party. So that's how long Frodo's had the ring. And Frodo's question, quite reasonably, is, I've had this ring, I've had this nuclear bomb in my house for 17 years. And you know, my beloved Bilbo had it for longer. How long have you known about this? He's taking offense. Why shouldn't he? How come you haven't told me about this? Well, I still don't know. I don't know for sure, but I don't doubt my guess. When did I first begin to guess? He mused, searching back in memory. So, I wonder if he's searching back in memory, or if he has an answer. I guess we have to take narrator at his word. It was when Bilbo found his ring. So that was 60 years before the long expected party, so 77 years ago. That's when I first began to guess. A shadow fell on my heart then. It plainly was... Okay, so I marked this. There are 4 pieces of evidence that Gandalf gives for his guess. He still says it's a guess. He doesn't doubt his guess, but he doesn't know. I don't know if that's splitting hairs to me, but okay, first, I often wondered how Gollum came by a great ring, as plainly it was. First piece of evidence, it is plainly a great ring. He gives his evidence for that, but that's his first piece of evidence, and I want to come back to that. Second, Bilbo was trying to put his claim to the ring beyond doubt. That is evidence for him that it is a evil, malevolent influence on Bilbo. It is a great ring. It is evil. Or at least unwholesome. Sorry, clearly the ring had an unwholesome power that set to work on its keeper at once. Further down, end of that page, Bilbo showed no signs of age. The shadow fell on me again. It's extending his life. Clearly extending his life. The shadow fell on me again. I got worried again. That's third piece of evidence. And then finally, and I waited until that night when he left this house. He said and did things that night that filled me with a fear that no words of Saruman could allay. I knew at last, yada yada yada. I knew. Conspicuous word. So, Bilbo's behavior in not being willing to give away the ring was the fourth piece of evidence. So, I was filled with fear. I knew that something dark and deadly was at work. Apart from the other evidence, it's fair to say Gandalf knew for 17 years. At minimum. He had a guess before. He had a shadow on his heart. But he has known pretty well for 17 years. Now, coming back to that first one. Plainly, it was a great ring. We know the poem. Gandalf knew the poem. 3, 7, 9, and 1. Gandalf knows where the 3 rings are. Gandalf knows where the 9 rings are. The 7, he has pretty well accounted for. They're either known, or Sauron has them, or they're destroyed by dragons. That leaves the one. And it's pretty easy to say, okay, well, you should have known immediately. It's a great ring. We know where the other 19 are. That's the one, right? But in the context of the words of Saruman, who said, can't be the one is gone. The one was rolled down the river into the sea, right? It's accounted for. And Saruman, we are told, the lore of the Great Ring, of the Elven Rings, great and small, is his province. He has long studied it, seeking the lost secrets of their making. But when the rings were debated in the council, all that he said would reveal all that he would reveal to us of his ring lore told against my fears. So he has it on at least as good authority as the dwarven rings are destroyed that this can't be the one ring. So it's clearly a great ring, but he can't figure out which one it is. But there's a shadow on his heart. So how long has he known? Well, now says he's known for 17 years to the extent that he knows now. I'm just gonna catch up on the chat here. Yes, Paige and Christy and Holly. Yes, good. I like this train of thought here. So, Holly. So I like this point. The identity of this ring and the subsequent necessary actions come with a huge weight. You would want to be absolutely sure before undertaking any of it or making accusations. And I think it's that last part, making accusations, because you can't put the pin back in that grenade. If you're going to say, hey, head of my order, Saruman, the one whose province it is to know the Elven Rings, you're wrong. I'm just an amateur studying this, and I know what we've said in council, but I'm pretty sure that you're wrong about the thing that is your field of study. That's an uncomfortable accusation to make. And you don't want to be wrong about that. Never mind the implications of, okay, what do we do with it now? But yeah, weigh that against, as Christy says, how many red flags does one need to raise an alarm here? That's the question. And I guess the answer is 4 that he gives anyway, up to and including the night of the long expected party. But then what do you do, right? That's a fair question. And that comes back to one of Jesse's questions. Why didn't he go to Saruman immediately? Why didn't Gandalf go to Saruman immediately and say, we found the Great Ring, I know it's got to be this, look at all this evidence. Well, he's been saying for how long that it can't possibly, it doesn't exist, it's not around anymore. How do you go to him with that? Do you trust him to go to him with that? I guess you have to trust him. We see evidence later that he does still trust him. But someone who said you have to be sure. Can't remember. Sorry, I've missed it in the chat. But you have to be sure before you're going to go to Saruman with that. And making this test in the fire is how you get sure. And yes, Paige. So you'd want to keep panic at a low. I'm not sure if you're referencing this exactly, but Gandalf is very fond of the Shire and the hobbits. Does he really want to incorrectly raise the accusation, not accusation, but the suggestion that they possess the One Ring, and then have the eyes of the wise, the world fixed on them, disrupting, even just Frodo's life? He'd want to be sure. And I think that the key that we have to come back to is, sorry, who said it here? Silbusha. Oh, is that Lola? I think I recognize her picture there. Yes. You're a hobbit. I knew you would hide it. Yes. Well, I mean, they've done a good job of it so far, right? I think he feels like, where else would it be safer if it is? Just catching up on the chat, one sec. Stephanie Wilson. Yeah, okay, so Gandalf talks about other magic rings. There's always the possibility it could have been one of the other types of magic rings that we don't get much info on. So there are two major classifications of magic ring, as I understand them. There are great rings and lesser rings. And for the reasons that he gives, it is plainly a great ring. And there are only 20 great rings. There are the 9 for men, 7 for dwarves, 3 for the Elven Kings, and the 1 ring for Sauron. There aren't any other great rings. And it's not a lesser ring because of the effect that it has lengthening his lifespan and the seemingly corruptive influence of making him tell a lie about how he got it. Gandalf dismisses that immediately. It can't be some other magic ring. It has to be one of those 20. M asks, why do they think it going into the river means it is lost forever? Exactly. I'm not sure where this comes up. This may have been from Unfinished Tales, so I may be bringing something in elsewhere. Anyway, the reason why, and I don't think it's in this chapter, but the reason why Saruman says it can't be the One Ring, I've studied it, it fell into the river. He goes on to say, and the river has rolled it down into the Great Sea. It's at the bottom of the sea somewhere. No one will ever find it. It'll be there until the world ends. That's not in this chapter, but that's the element of all that he would reveal to us of his ring lore told against my fears. So somewhere else, I can't remember where, History of Middle-earth or Unfinished Tales or something, what that is, what Tolkien clearly had in mind was it fell into the river, we know that, and further to that, I have discovered that Ulmo rolled it down into the sea, and he kind of hints that he has been directly told this by one of the Valar, so, trust me on this one, right? Mighty Bearcat, if he suspected that Bilbo was going to travel after his party, why not Bilbo take it to the elves and have them check it out? I don't think Gandalf wants it there, ideally, until he, I don't know that they would have more lore than him. And if the ring is in Rivendell, that's a risk. Someone might claim it. It has that allure, right? Like, Frodo gets sent out to Rivendell as a last resort. He can't stay in the Shire. Okay, well, fine, go to Rivendell. But that's not a great solution. That's not like I have some doubts about this. Maybe it's the Great Ring. You should just go to Rivendell. It'll be safe there. I don't think it's safe there. I don't think that's a good solution. I mean, he probably thinks, Elrond is probably safe. He's probably not going to claim it. But there are elf lords there. What if one of them wants to set up shop as a conqueror? Jesse, I was just always confused about why he didn't do the throwing into the fire test 17 years ago, if that so specifically identifies it. Okay, so now I'm conflating the book and the movie, but no, we'll learn. Yes, this is, I think, still consistent. He has to go to. He doesn't know that like that's not part of the ring lore that throwing it into the fire will reveal the fiery script. He has to go learn that, and it ends up being at Minas Tirith in the archives there. But that's not known. I don't think that's something that he could have just tested. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but I think that's why he didn't know that was a test he could make. I think he came back to make that test because he learned about it. Yeah, Christy. So I think the most likely of the great rings, if it's not the one, would be that it would be a dwarf ring. Someone thought that a dragon burned it up or ate it or whatever, and that wasn't so. It was spared, so it's one of those. But your point about so the 9 are wraiths, the 3 are with the elves, so it's not one of the 3. But the 9, I still think in theory, an element of doubt exists that it could be one of the 9, because, well, I think we'll see this, but let's look at this. I don't think that the ring wraiths, the Nazgul, have their rings on at the time. I think that Sauron has those, so he could have just sent one out again, or several out again, to entrap more mortals. It's possible. Lola, wondering if Gandalf's late reaction wasn't also connected to the fact that wizards were allowed to act only when there was no other option. Where is that said? Is that... I think you've made that point before, and I can't put my finger on where are you getting that? I'm not saying you're wrong, but where are you getting that stipulation that wizards are only allowed to act when there's no other option? I don't remember that from, but that's possible if true. Did only Gandalf know the ring wanted to be found, Paige? No, I don't think so. I think Saruman would have known that as well, for sure. Wouldn't they need rings on to be controlled, the Nazgul? No, I don't think so. I think that once you're wraithified... Let's look at this when we get there, but I don't think that... I don't think so. I don't think that's the case. I think that he could take them back. Because, and maybe I'm just saying that because in the original conception, in one of Tolkien's early drafts, Sauron was just like giving out rings like candy. Like he made a bunch and then would just like throw them around the world and let people find them, become wraiths. You know, dwarves, men, elves, they're all walking around wraithified, and then they come back to Sauron, and then he throws the ring out there again. It's just like fishing. And I think that survived, that concept. Not like giving out rings like candy, but the fact that once you're a wraith, then you've been wraithified. Yeah. So that was the other passage that people really wanted a close reading on. Anyone else have any other questions about how long Gandalf knew? I think that's a big question, and it's a thorny one. Yeah, Christy, exactly. The rings are well, the rings are still bait in the final version. I mean, he gives them out to dwarf lords and kings of men and wise men and whoever else he thinks that he can be entrapped. But I don't think he ends up giving them out again in this concept. No. The only other thing is, I'll take any other questions that come up, but the only other thing that okay, two things, and I'm just blatantly stealing them from Corey Olson's Exploring the Lord of the Rings podcast, but at the end of the chapter, Sam's when Sam is pulled in the window, what the other podcast refers to as Sam's infenestration, which is just awesome. The way that Sam is a crafty one, and I don't think he gets enough credit for it, because I think that you talk about Gandalf being evasive and not answering the question directly. Boy, Sam does a good job of that, and I think that we'll find out later why he was dropping them eaves. But the one thing I wanted to call attention to is his punctuating every sentence near the end with "elves, sir." In his explanation, what did you hear? What have you heard, and why did you listen? Well, sir, said Sam, dithering a little, I heard a deal that I didn't rightly understand about an enemy and rings, and Sir Bilbo, sir, and dragons and a fiery mountain, and elves, sir. I listened because I couldn't help myself, if you know what I mean. Lord bless me, sir, but I do love tales of that sort, and I believe them too, whatever Ted may say. Elves, sir. I would dearly love to see them. Can't you take me to go see... I'll come in again. Couldn't you take me to see elves, sir, when you go? So there's elves, sir, with a period, elves, sir, with an exclamation mark, and elves, sir, when you go, with a question mark. Oh, the way he can't seem to say elves without sir, it just gets me every time. Jesse, what are you translating eaves from to? Paige, yeah, is that why Bilbo felt stretched and thin, because the ring was turning him into a wraith? Yeah, that's what was happening. If he stayed long enough. Now, I mean, it would have taken a long time, and we know that because Gollum, who was not so much like unlike a hobbit himself, had the ring for 400 years, and he's loathsome and slimy, but he is not he's not a wraith, of course, right? Hobbits can endure, and I think that's one of the other reasons why Gandalf felt comfortable leaving it with Bilbo for so long and with Frodo, because I mean, he knows from Bilbo's story, he guessed immediately that Gollum was hobbit-like. And so, okay, well, we've got some time to play with. It's only been 60 years. Gollum endured it for, 400 or so. He's not in imminent danger of becoming a wraith. And it works faster on you the more evilly and the more you use it, which Bilbo was not. Gollum was. So I think, yes, he would have continued to feel stretched and thin, and his life would not have been pleasant, but I think if he had continued to use it in that way, just hiding from the Sackville Bagginses, he probably could have lived 1,000 years, I would imagine, without becoming a wraith. Oh, okay, so you're... Jesse's reading it in... So we have... Oh, I love all the language. Okay, so... Jesse, in the chat, at least in the Discord, please feel free to... I would really love to hear... if you can put maybe in like one of the breakout rooms, but I would love to see the Ring poem in German if you have it at your fingertips. I would love to read that. I won't even say I can speak a bit of German. I lived in Germany for a little while, and I didn't pick up enough of it, but I think I could struggle through the Ring poem, and I would like to see that. So if you have access to it, I would love to see that if possible. Asks, anyone can anyone become a wraith? Yeah, so I mean, I think we'll get more into that, but yes, it's not just humans who can become wraiths. Could a elf? That's a trickier one. In Tolkien's early versions, yes. I think maybe not in this one. Let's look at that. But absolutely any mortal creature could become a wraith. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I didn't know the volume wasn't loud enough. I can always turn that up, I think. I'm not going to monkey with it now. I'll just talk louder. Sorry. Yeah, Paige, I don't know about, because, okay, we're getting too far ahead, but elves live, at once in both worlds, kind of, or at least elves who have been to Valinor. Could a elf become a wraith? I'll think on that. Probably, but I don't know. Bring the mic closer, sure. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Could an elf become a wraith despite being immortal? It wouldn't have the same effect. It doesn't. A great ring won't prolong an elf's lifespan, right? Because they are immortal. That's a tricky one. I'm really, yes, Em and Paige, I'm really trying not to not to spoiler too much. I'm not great at it, but I'm trying. Would it corrupt an elf? Absolutely. Absolutely, that is certain. Yes. Yeah. If Galadriel claimed it, if Elrond claimed it, if any of the elves claimed it, yes, they could not use it for good. That I am certain of. Yeah. Yeah. Would they become a wraith? Probably. I go back and forth on that. I think I land for now on no. But evil? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. I know many of you are well into your night or early morning, so I will close up the formal part there. Happy to continue to chat if anyone has any other thoughts or questions. Love doing this, but let's close the close reading there and the official questions, and say goodnight to everyone who has stayed up very late for this. Thank you very much, guys. That was really fun. I'm going to catch up on the chat here. Aiden, yes, that's exactly how I read and understand the sensation of stretching thin. Stretching thin comes from being preserved beyond a mortal's natural lifespan, being stuck in a body not made for immortality. Right. So I don't know exactly how the butter scraped over too much bread thing is great, because that's a fun analogy. You don't gain more life, you just stretch that life over a longer temporal span, right? And I think that an analogy I heard once that I quite liked was, and I can't remember if it was from one of the books or something else. Anyway, I don't know where to credit it, but not mine originally. It's like opening a barrel of beer, opening the top of a barrel of beer, opening the spigot and letting it pour out, but then pouring water into it from the top at the same rate. So it never runs out, it just gets more diluted. So the beer continues to pour, and it just gets more watery and more watery and more watery as it pours. And that's the beer in this analogy is your life, a mortal's life. and it continues to flow. It just gets weaker and weaker and weaker. And that works for me. I like that analogy. It makes it clear for me. Jesse, yeah, keep the questions coming. Everyone, keep the questions coming. I made that the channel in the server, the book questions one, in the hopes of attracting questions that we can discuss on here. That would be my ideal. So please put them in there. Yes, Aiden, exactly. You become a wraith when you are essentially all water and no beer. Yes, when it passes a certain threshold, like let's say when it stops being like Canadian or European beer and becomes more like American beer, that is when you're a wraith. When you're still living, but you might not be living your life, Paige. Yes. I mean, it is your life. It's just, it's so thin and wispy and poorly remembered that it may as well not be. But you're still living. Yeah, it doesn't sound appealing. Good. Okay. Frodo. Okay, so next, well, starting on Sunday, we're going to read Three's Company. Now, while we're still here, let me get your thoughts on this. So, I will make a confession. Between Three's Company and Fog on the Barrow Downs, this is for people who have read the book before, I will confess that once we get to Three's Company, I will confess that I am mostly just looking forward to Fog on the Barrow Downs and beyond. That's not a great attitude, but that is what it is. I'm wondering if we might do... Is it a stretch to do 2 chapters in a week? What are your thoughts? Say have Three's Company read by Sunday, have A Shortcut to Mushrooms read by Wednesday, The Old Forest by the next Sunday, and then get into Fog on the Barrow Downs. So here's my thing. I understand why Tolkien spends so much time in the Shire early on. The story's a little bit slow to get going, and a lot of people, just sort of pick up the books and put them down 2-3 chapters in because it's unfolding slowly. And I get that. But it also is so important to fall in love with the Shire. We have to understand, the reader has to understand what Frodo is leaving to protect, why he is so motivated to do this, why he is so passionate about going into exile to protect the Shire and the home that he loves. And there are so many opportunities to fall in love with the Shire between Three's Company and A Shortcut to Mushrooms. And there's so much landscape description and so much hobbitry. And he admits it's self-indulgent because he and Christopher, his son, love it so much. The Hobbit banter and interplay. And in the first drafts, there was way more of it. But it's so... I feel guilty going through it quickly. What are you guys thinking? Yes, I did skip In the House of Tom Bombadil. Yes, no, I'm not going to skip that. Tom Bombadil. I'm conflicted. We'll get to that. Okay. I am not seeing a lot of objections here. I'm going to put it out to... M says would prefer to do 1 chapter. Having a discussion midweek isn't doable. Yeah, I get that too. Maybe we'll do one chapter this week, and then Three's Company. Well, Three's Company is long, so maybe we shouldn't do that. Nah, Three's Company is long. That's a long chapter. We shouldn't do that in a couple days, but I am reserving the right to have a shortcut to mushrooms and a conspiracy unmasked in 1 week. Let's put a pin in that one. We'll talk about it, but I wanted to raise it, get people's thoughts. Okay, yeah, Jenny needs to catch up. Okay. Yes. It is not fair to, on Thursday, say we're doing 2 chapters by Wednesday. No, okay, we're gonna keep the pace where it is, but we might speed it up in a little while. Haley next, yes. The initial Fellowship chapters is Tolkien waxing poetic about how much he loves the land. It is. That's exactly what it is. It's beautifully self-indulgent, and I respect that. Is that right, Holly? 5.5 months if we do 1 chapter a week. I thought there were 50 odd chapters. Okay. Yeah, Mighty Bearcat, that's kind of my thing. If we're doing all 3 books, which I intend to, it'll take a while with 1 chapter a week. 22-ish chapters. What do I have here? No, it's got to be more than that. I see what you mean. We'll be done Fellowship. Yes. We'll be done Fellowship of the Ring in 5.5 months. Not 2 Towers and Return of the King. Yeah. Good. Okay. Both being on Sunday. Yeah, I like that too. Okay. We're doing 1 chapter just, I agree. 1 chapter just for this Sunday, and then let's look at it then. Let's talk to people then. Okay. Well, it's Unfinished Tales that you saw. Okay. I'll look at that too. Okay. They have rules. Good. Okay. I will actually let you go. Thank you very much, everyone. I will shut this down, but put any extra thoughts in Discord, and I promise I will be on there more than I was this week. Good night, everyone.